Yo, what's up guys, back again with another video in the Node.js and Express series. This episode I'm going to show you how to make a MongoDB. I know it's been a while since I posted a video, but it's time to get coding again. I've been pretty busy, so I'm ready to get back into this thing. So the first thing we want to do is, we already know last episode and the episodes before that we were able to, make it so that we can actually add games to our little database here. But as you can see here, the database is kind of stupid. It's a little simple. And basically, if we were to add something in our database to our database within the application, it's going to be deleted by the time the application is restarted. So basically what I'm trying to say is we need a way for us to store data permanently until we delete it or edit it or whatever we want to do, okay? So we're going to need a more permanent database solution to actually achieve the storage of data in our application, okay? And nowadays the most common way to do that with web development is going to be using a database thing called MongoDB, okay? And MongoDB is a special kind of database that is basically a newer and more easier and awesome to use version of MySQL, because MySQL is very, it's good. It's a good solution for databases, in the past, but nowadays you're going to want MongoDB because you don't have to do a bunch of stuff like make tables and stuff like that to actually get your program to work. And it's a lot to talk about, so I'm just going to give you that pretty much. And then if you're more interested in a MongoDB and all that fun stuff, you can watch my other series that will be coming out pretty soon, and I'll go into detail about MongoDB and all that fun stuff. So if you're interested, do that, and you can just always Google it if you want to, of course. And yeah, so anyway, basically what we need to do is somehow set up MongoDB in our application, okay? And get rid of that. I didn't mean to have that there. We're going to do that in a second. So anyway, the first thing we want to do is actually create a database, okay? And we're going to do that with a special website called Mlab, okay? And Mlab is basically a website that will host your database within the cloud, within the internet, okay? And I recommend this website. It's pretty simple. You can get free databases for a certain amount of storage, and yeah, it's awesome. Really, you can do it for free pretty much. And there are plans you could pay for, but it's a lot of data, so you probably won't need it considering the type of project that we're working on. But anyway, let me just delete this old one here because I used this before you made this episode, so let me just delete this one. Okay, and what we're going to do is once you sign up and everything, get to this screen here. You won't see these two probably if you never used this before, but go to here and then click create new, okay? So we're going to create a new, database, okay? So click sandbox because we're going to use the free tier, of course. And that's going to give us 0.5 gigabytes of storage, which is about 500 megabytes if I remember correctly. And that's a good amount of data. That's very awesome. So you can also choose any of these, I guess. So I'm just choose Google Cloud, doesn't matter. And so you can continue from there. Click this, continue again. Now you can choose a database name, and we're just going to call it YouTube because this is going to be the YouTube tutorial, of course. And it looks good to me, so submit. And it'll do the order for you, and it's free, don't worry. Now it's just going to take a second to set up your database for you. Okay, now that the database is set up, it should look like this. So if we click on it now, it'll take us to that database, and that's it for now. So what we need to do now is actually connect to the database, okay? And so to connect to a database, you actually have to have a user to connect to it, at least with Mlab, of course. So we're going to create a new user here, and you can literally call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it Node.js series, or I'll just call it Node.js, that's fine. And you can give it any password. I'll just call it password 123, password 123, just like that. Of course, you can choose whatever you want. It's all your choice, okay? But anyway, we want to go back here and just stay on the screen, and now what we're going to do is go to our console here, and let's install a package, and it's going to be called npm install Mongoose, okay? Mongoose, like, I believe that's an animal, a bird or something, or a goose or something, I don't know. Anyway, so install that package, okay? And this is going to be the package we're going to use to communicate with our database, okay? It's going to be using MongoDB to communicate with their database, of course. But if you're wondering, we can actually use the MongoDB, the language itself from MongoDB. We can use the driver, but Mongoose is way easier. It's a simple package to use, so we're going to be using that instead of actual MongoDB itself. So basically, Mongoose is actually going to be using MongoDB, okay, in the background, I guess you could say. Anyway, I know that's a lot, but let's just go back here now to our application and let's install it. Well, not really install it, let's just require it. So const mongoose is equal to require mongoose, of course, and that's, you know, that's how we're going to use mongoose with our application. And so the next logical step to actually add, you know, this database to our application here is to connect to it whenever it starts up, okay? So of course this file is going to run whenever it starts up, so the first thing we want to do on this first line here after all these require statements is connect to the database. So we're going to do mongoose.connect, okay? And that's going to call upon a special method that will connect to the database. And the first parameter we need is going to be a string of a URI, okay? And a URI is not the same thing as URL, but it basically is, you know, it's pretty much the same thing, but it's not. But it doesn't really matter, okay? But the point is, we need a special URI that is going to be our database, okay? So if we go back here to our Mlab website, it actually tells us the URI that we can use to connect to the database, okay? So if we just copy this here, Control-C to copy, and we go back, we could paste this in here, and then now we just need to change this to our user that we just made, so Node.js, that's the name of the user, and then here we put the password, so, oops, password like that, we'll do password 123 because that's what I set my password to. So that alone will connect to the database, and so there's one more thing we need. We're going to need some parameters to get this working. It should work from here actually, but you might get a little bit of an error, so I recommend you add this here. So use new URL parser, and then on the other side of that you put true, and that's all you need, okay? And of course a semicolon, and if you want to, you can also have a callback function so we know that it worked or didn't work. And it's going to be one parameter, just error, okay? So that's our callback function. We accidentally got rid of a parenthesis, so we'll put it back right here. And so inside of, spelled function wrong, okay? So inside of our callback function, we'll do if error, we'll print out that error, just like that. And then else, we could say console.log connected to the database, just like that. And that will make sure and let us know if it worked or not. So if we go ahead and go back here, we can do Node.js or node-mon to start up our application, and hopefully it says connected to that database. Awesome, so that worked perfectly. Just to make sure the error part of it works, to make sure this works, let's actually change this up a little bit so we know it doesn't work. And yeah, it prints out a giant error. It says authentication failed because it failed to authenticate the password that we just entered, okay? Awesome, so that works perfectly. And so the next thing we want to do is actually make it so that we can actually add data to that database, okay? And like I said, I'm not going to go too into detail about how databases work or how MongoDB works, but basically you're going to have a database, right? Like we just created one here called the YouTube database. And inside of that database, you're going to have basically many databases inside of the database, okay? So tiny individual databases, okay? So that's going to be called a collection, okay? And so a collection is going to hold specific data. Like, for example, we're going to be storing games on our website, right? And displaying games to the user so they can play. So we're going to want to store information on those games like we have here. Like, you know, the title, the creator, width, height, file name, and thumbnail file, okay? And that's going to be the games collection, okay? Because we're storing information on games, okay? You can call it whatever you want, but that's just what it's called, okay? So basically, we're going to make a mini database, basically called a collection, that's going to hold information on our games, okay? So anyway, let's go ahead and do that, okay? And to actually have that, you're going to need a model, okay? And a schema, okay? So a schema that goes to a model that goes to our collection, okay? And I know all that terminology is really confusing, but basically the first thing we need to do is make a template for our collection, okay? This is not something you really have to do with MongoDB, because the way MongoDB works is you don't have to basically make a table for data like you have to do in MySQL, but it's just good to do with Mongoose. I think you have to do it with Mongoose, I'm not sure, but it's still important to do because, you know, it provides some structure to your database and it's really cool. You're going to do var game schema. If you're making something else that's not a game website, of course you can call it like something like book schema, whatever you want to call it. But I'm going to call mine game schema because we're going to be storing basically games, right? So var game schema is equal to new mongoose.schema, okay? And then we're going to put a, curly bracket here. And then inside of that, we're going to create our model, our template basically, okay? Our schema, I mean, not model. And so inside of here, you're going to want to create a value or a variable, basically, you could say, for every piece of data that every game is going to have. For example, as you can tell, each game here in this little mini database that we have all have a title, they all have a creator, they all have a width, they all have a height, okay? So as you can see, they're basically following their own little template, okay? And they can have extra stuff if they want to on each individual, objects here, but basically they all have they all have similar attributes, okay? So what we want to do is have the same thing for our schema here, okay? Because our schema is going to be our template, okay? So what we want, of course, is for every game to have a title, just like before. So, title, and then you want to have a colon here. On the other side of the colon, you're going to want to put the data type of our attribute or variable, whatever it's called, okay? So it's going to be called a string, because that's going to be a string, title is a string. Then now you want the creator, that's also going to be a string. Now you want the width, that's going to be a number, okay? And you want the height, that's also going to be a number. Then you want the file name, that's going to be a string. Of course, you need some commas after these, and then lastly, you're going to want a thumbnail file, and that's going to be a string also, okay? So that's how you do that. Now we have a schema, basically a template for each of our documents or games in our collection, okay? And so I just used a word called document, okay? So basically, if you want to learn what that means, you could say, here's our database, right? Here's our database. We have YouTube, that's the name of our database, and of course, inside of that, we have different collections, which are mini databases, right? So we can have, for example, the games collection, we could have the books collection, we could have the booty collection, okay? And inside of those collections, you're going to have even more data, which is going to be the individual objects that you store inside of those collections, okay? So inside of our games collection that we have here, we're going to store different games documents, okay? So a document is one object with data inside of it. So this here would be classified as a document, okay? And we store these 3 documents here inside of our theoretical collection, okay? So that's how that works, right? So now we want to use this schema here, or schema, to actually make a model, okay? A document model, okay? And this model is going to be what we use to create, edit, and delete documents within our collection, okay? So var game, and that will be the name of your individual, basically your document, okay, is equal to mongoose dot model, okay? And so the first parameter, of course, is also going to be what you named it here. So that would be the name of the model. So game model is going to be, and then the next parameter is going to be the schema or the template that you used. So we're going to do game schema right there, and that's it, okay? So what this is going to do is create a model for you that you can use to have a template for each of your documents in your collection, okay? And so we're going to use this model here to actually create objects of this model, which are going to be our actual documents, okay? And so I know that's a little confusing if you probably haven't worked with this before. Basically, this is what we use. This little variable here is what we use to create documents for our collection and our database, okay? So now we can create a document, okay? We can create an object that we can store inside of our database. So to do that, we do game.create, okay? And this is a method that we use to actually add data to our database, okay? So game.create, and then the first thing we want to have is going to be the actual document or the actual information that we want to store in our database, okay? So basically, we can just copy this one here, really, because we already have one. And we just paste it right there. So this is going to be an object that we want to store as a document inside of our database, okay? And the next thing you're going to want to have is going to be your callback function, okay? So because we want to handle errors and stuff like that if there is any. So error, and then we want data, okay? And so we can do if error. So if there's an error that occurs, then we could do console.log an error, or we could say there was a problem adding a document to the collection, okay? And then we could say console.log because we want to see what the error is, so we do console.log error. And the next thing we want to do is if there are no errors, we want to see the data. We can actually return the data that we just stored in the database, okay? So we can say data, string data added to collection, okay? And we can say what the data was, so we can console.log that data, just so we know what we just put in the collection. And so that will do all of that, okay? So I know that was a lot, but let's go ahead and test this out right here. Let's scroll down all the way. And as you can see, it did it, okay? So, because we're using NodeMon, so it automatically, started up for us already before we even clicked up here. But anyway, what it did is it started the server, of course, started our application. And then it said connected to the database, of course, because that's up here, what it's doing. And the next thing it did, it says data added to collection, okay? And then it sent us this little object here, okay? And if you remember, like 2 seconds ago, we just created a thing that tells us to say data added to collection, and then it prints back the data, okay? So what it did is it printed back the data that was just added to our collection of game data, okay? And so we have, our object here that we just created, of course, because if we go back up here, that's the same exact thing that we put into here, okay? That's what we created, okay? It added some extra data to it, added this little weird underscore v kind of thing right here. But also we have an ID, okay? And an ID is a special ID, basically, that is attached to every individual document within your database, okay? And so we can use this ID later on to actually reference this document and do some cool stuff. So you'll see, we'll be doing plenty of examples and working with MongoDB plenty in the future, okay? So I know that's a lot. So what we want to do now is actually go back to our Mlab and check it out, see if it was added, okay? Because we can actually see it, what we added. So now, as you can see here, we have a collection called games, okay? And why do we have a collection here? We never even created anything called games. We created a model called game, but we never created something called games. Well, the thing is, whenever you try adding a document to a collection that doesn't exist, it'll take that document and then create the collection for you, okay? So what it did basically is take this model here and then add an S onto the end of the name of the model, so it called it games for us, okay? So it's all very magical, and it did that for us. So now we can click on this collection here, and we can see all of the data within the collection here. And all of these things here, these are all of our documents, okay? So as you can see here, they all have their own ID. If we scroll, and these are empty because, I'll explain that in a second. But anyway, if we go down here, you can see that they all have the data that we just added, okay? And if you're wondering why there's so many and why some of them are empty, it's because, as we're editing our program, NodeMon is automatically restarting our application, of course. So that's why I added all these while we didn't tell it to, okay? So anyway, we can just delete all these by doing delete all documents in collection. There we go. And so we can just stop this here, and we'll start it up one more time. And that will start it one time, so it should add one document. So if we reload here, and now it has the single document here. And even more magical, we can click this here, and we can edit that document, okay? That's pretty cool, right? So that's pretty awesome, right, guys? We can actually create a database now and then add data to that database, okay? So now we're able to permanently store data within a database so that we can take the data and then do stuff with it, okay? But as you can see here, our program, if we go to, let's see here, if we go to the list route here, it's still gathering the information from this games array here, okay? So what we want to do is, instead of getting it from here, we want to get it from our database that we just created, okay? So the way we can do that is actually something we'll be doing in the next episode, okay? So don't really worry about that too much yet. But I can just show you real quick how to gather data from the database, okay? Because we can store data, but we actually want to retrieve data too. That's very important, okay? So the way that you, retrieve data from your local collection or database, we could do game.find, okay? So that's how you find documents from your collection, okay? And the first parameter is going to be basically the search terms that you want to use to identify a document from your database, okay? So basically, if you want to take every single database every single document from your database, just pretty much have an empty curly brackets here. So no more. So there's going to be no parameters basically inside of here. So if there's no parameters, it's going to basically find all of the documents, okay? So that basically will retrieve all the documents. So now we want a callback function. We'll do error and then data, because it might return an error, but also might return some data if it did it correctly. And so we want to handle that individually. So if error, then we can say console.log problem finding data. So it could not find the data for some reason. And then now we want to say console.log, here is all of the data from our collection. Okay, and then we want to print out the data. And there we go. So let's see what happens if we restart here. So node app.js. So it's kind of backwards for some reason. It showed us the data that we added. It did this before. It did this one right here before it did this one for some reason. It's not really that important because we won't be using this in the next episode. But that's kind of interesting. But anyway, what it did is it took the data from the collection and it showed us. It printed it out for us. So that's pretty cool. And then of course it added another document because we still have this code here. So that's pretty cool. So if we go back here, of course, it'll have 2 now because we ran it twice. Oh, let's go here. So yeah, we have 2 now. So if we even restart this again, it should display 2 now. Oops. App.js. It should display 2 documents whenever we call upon the find method here. And here we go. So we get an array of documents here. Oops. We get an array of documents with their own IDs, and then that's pretty cool. So anyway, I know that was a lot, but now you know how to actually, create a database with Mlab, connect to it with Mongoose, and then create a model for it, a template for it, that we can use to create individual documents here with the create method. And then once we have those documents created inside of our collections in our database, we actually find all of the data in our database and then display it to the user. So that's pretty cool, right? And I know that was a lot. I'm sorry if that was a little confusing, but like I said, I'll have another series on it if you're a little more interested in pursuing what all this means. But if you don't want to do all that, you could of course just Google some more information on how to use MongoDB or what MongoDB is all about, of course. But anyway, the point of knowing all of this is next episode we're going to take this data that we just retrieved here and display it on the list route so that they can basically take all of the data from our database and list it to the user like you would do with this old database here. So we can just comment this out because we don't need it anymore. But yeah, so anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions at all, I'm sure you might, because it was a little confusing probably if I went too fast for you guys. But if you have any questions at all, you can just always go in the comment section and ask a question if you want to. Also, we have a Discord in the description also. You make sure you check that out. Join the Discord, hang out with us, ask questions, whatever you want to do. It's all your choice. And so yeah, if you liked the video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe, and peace.